how's it going? I'm here at night on a Tuesday waiting for students to come in here in the loft, and I wanted to give you a kind of a quick little lesson on some tricks of the trade that I think are really pretty cool that might give you a little bit of an advantage. Kind of little doodads and little things that will help you get by to maybe give you a better sound, prevent you from getting into hot water with your engineer, and even on a live gig, what can actually help you get the sound that you're looking for. And these are things that I've learned over the years that I thought would actually help you along. First, let's talk about muffling. All right. I never like to use like the internal mufflers. And I got this reasoning from listening to one of my drummer friends. A lot of the internal mufflers, Ludwig used to have a little baseball bat or a little, circular thing that would actually muffle. They have one here on this particular drum, right here. I don't know whether you can see it right there. And that little circular muffler, I never really use, simply because of the logic that in order to muffle the drum, the muffler pushes up against the head, and you're kind of playing down on the head. So consequently, you're putting a little bit more stress and a little bit more muffling than you really need to on it. It's countering each other like that. So if anybody knows me, and anybody knows the things that I did on Harmony Central, I am known as the king of duct tape and bar napkins. That's what I used to use whenever on a live gig. When you're sitting down and that head is really boinging out, you need to cut it down. I used to take a bar napkin and fold it up kind of like into about an inch or an inch and a half rolled little oblong thing. Let's take it this way. And I used to take a strip of, at that time, duct tape. Now it's gaff tape because I don't like to leave the residue on the things that the duct tape does, and tape it right to the edge, around the edge of the drum head. Really cuts out any of the ring. Just like all that boinginess now gets cut down with the duct tape and gaff tape, whichever you want, and a super little bar napkin. Not too thick, not too thin. Also, for when I was muffling out my drums for using drum triggers, I would actually fold this in half and make it into a little kind of like a patch and cover the entire piece with tape. And it would really, when you're using triggering on electronic drums, the last thing you want to do is the head to ring excessively, because it just triggers the sound over and over. You have to muffle them down, not too much because you still want a good live sound, but you want them to muffle down the head so that it doesn't reverberate over and over and over and keep triggering the electronics. So that's one of the other things that I've learned. Take it into a smaller section and cover the entire thing. Put it right by the actual triggering unit, and it'll help actually create a nice triggered drum sound. Now, bass drum technique and bass drum muffling. Let's start with sound first before I get into the muffling. I use, believe it or not, these things. No one virtually uses this technique anymore. This is a 3/16 of an inch piece of leather. Most of people use these pads and the hard pads with the metal in them and things like that. There is nothing like a piece of leather. And this leather right here, actually, because it's so thick, I use a very, very hard beater, either a wood beater or a plastic beater or, something like that with a lot of beater space. When my beater hits this leather, it makes the sound that a baseball makes when it's being caught like a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, because it makes that pop inside the glove. Hitting this leather gives you that little bit of kick right along with it. Now, how do you mount it? Well, I either use double-sided tape, like they used to that they use on regular traditional paper. They make it in wide strips. Or once again, I take gaff tape and tape it just about a ½ inch all the way around the actual patch. Put it on my beater face out. Hold it down on the beater. Push the beater to the head so it's centered. And then press in the tape around it. And what it does is it creates a nice impact sound rather than a hard knock. And it actually protects that head. I had one patch that lasted about 25 years on mine. I never went through a bass drum head after I put one of these things on. A buddy of mine actually had a really good thing, a guy named John Dotson, who used to play with a band called Paper Cup. He told me about a Danmar rock pad, and it was a pad, like a circular pad that had adhesive on it, but inside the center wasn't a metal pad, it was a compressed cardboard pad. It also gave more of a hard knock and let low frequencies in as well. It would let you have a lot of low end and still give you a real high kick when it's actually impacted. I want to tell you about a couple of other things that I used to use. And this came from a good buddy of mine, Gant Kushner. Gant told me about a snare drum muffling technique, which was the wildest thing that I've ever heard of, which was actually pretty cool. He said to me, one of the really nice techniques that you can use on a snare drum or even on a tom-tom is one of these, a credit card. Now, you say, well, what do? Just lay it on, lay it on down? No, what happens is you tape down one side, just down here, and you tape it right on the drum. And when you strike the drum, it's a really cool kind of muffling. When you strike the drum, the pad actually comes up when you strike it, and then to cut the tone short, it actually lays right back down. And if you listen to what it sounds like on a drum without it, and when you put this on here, and as you can see, I don't have it taped down, but as you can see, it completely cuts out the ring on a drum. And what this does is that it lets the sound come through for a small little length of time and then goes back down and cuts the sound off. And my last piece of sound sculpting and muffling is something that I had never heard of in my life, in my lifetime playing. I learned from a guy in Australia, and that I was actually showing this to one of my students. In fact, the student that just came in, and that is bass drum muffling. And this has to do with more of a necessity for me as I'm getting older. I don't know, most of us used to use these blankets or quilts or packing blankets, or we'd stuff a pillow in the bass drum or something like that, and we'd fill it all up and basically just look for a thud, and that was it. Well, I found out from this gentleman in Australia that you can do a little more than that and not be so heavy. Because I got to tell you, those packing blankets, those quilts, those pillows, make the bass drum heavy. And this is going to really freak you out because it did it for me. Take a look at this. This is a crunched up piece of newspaper. I found that if you take it and crunch it up into a little ball and leave it like this and throw it into the bass drum, one head or two heads, preferably two heads because you need it to stay in, you will be amazed at how much sound this pieces of paper, now I'm not saying just one, I'm talking about filling the bass drum up with this, say like a third of the way to a half of the way. You will be amazed at how much sound it completely muffles out. It comes out not only as a thud, but you still have that boom that's in there. And if you want a little more taken out, throw in a little more paper. And I don't know what it's doing. Some guys, a friend of mine was telling me about the physics of the sound going in the paper and the sound chamber and the muffling against the head. All I know is, after watching this video of this gentleman do it, he said it was an old studio technique, but I had never heard of it before, and maybe some of you have, but not me. This technique is wonderful because not only does it take out the sound, not only does it enhance the low end, it's lighter than all get out. That bass drum virtually weighs next to nothing other than the bass drum itself with this amount of paper inside of it. So those are my tips for tonight. It's time to go do a lesson. I'll talk to you soon.